Funerals actually take a lot more planning than I expected. With us using island cuisine for the first time, of course we were iffy, but once they came and showed us their service, their food, we tasted their food and everything, we definitely use them again because their service and food is just awesome.
I'll ride with the horses, I'll swim to the sea, I'll climb to the mountain tops. Won't you come follow me? I'll take time to notice all that I see, and after I've come so far, you know where I'll be. I'll fly away, fly away, fly away, fly away home. I'll fly away, fly away, fly away, fly away home. But life is a vision, that's how it should be. The world is a canvas, and the choices are free. At the end of the journey, where all is complete, they'll all wonder where I've gone, but you know where I'll be. I'll fly away, fly away, fly away, fly away home. I'll fly away, fly away, fly away, fly away home. Our dreams last forever, for all that we know. The roads come together, and that's where we'll go.
The Pampas,
An elite wish we go away.
because we are
real and direct.
no interest owns us.
And we have no interest but
The truth. Together we are exposing.
corruption.
Together we will reform criminal justice
Together,
We are fighting violence
against women and children.
We here at
Candid
will shine the light.
on every corner of darkness.
Together, we are giving a voice
to the voiceless.
and forgotten.
Together.
Together,
Together.
together,
Together, we are giving a voice to the voiceless and forgotten.
We are Candid News Group.
Welcome back. Sorry about that. We had a little glitch from our provider, but nothing we couldn't overcome. Thank you, Ken, for joining us or for staying with us. Sorry about the glitch that we had. But we were talking about crime, but now we want to move on to the discussion that we said that we would talk about, and that is the primary election. Just a little bit of information for our viewers. The Speaker called the legislature into emergency session this Wednesday. You've been asking her to do that.
Yeah.
And we've been told by legislative sources that 3 bills will be on the agenda. One of them is Bill 330 by Senator Kelly Marsh Taitano, and that is to expand qualifications for absentee ballots.
Yeah, mail-in vote.
Mail-in votes. And basically, if you are scared of COVID, then you can submit a mail-in vote. And to be honest with you, I haven't looked at the pros and cons of that. The other 2 bills that are the ones that are going to draw the most attention, and they are competing bills. One is Bill number 374 by Senator Joe San Augustine and some others that would cancel the primary election in so-called uncontested races. It would cancel the primary in 9 villages, and those 9 villages have uncontested mayoral races. And they just so happen to be villages that were the stronghold for, they're mainly central villages, the stronghold for then Congressman Robert Underwood when he was running for governor back in the day.
Yeah.
And where much of his organization is from, the strongholds for him, right? It would cancel the Republican congressional primary because Will Castro does not have an opponent, so to speak. Now, this is before even considering write-ins. And it will cancel the Democratic senatorial primary because there are only 15 Democratic senatorial candidates. The Republicans have 16.
Right.
I mean, 17 if you want to be real about Joanne Brown. But the other bill, the competing bill, is Bill number 375 by Senator Jim Moylan and Senator Therese Terlahi. And that is just to cancel the primary altogether.
Yeah, and have everybody go to the general.
And have everyone advance to the general election. Before our thoughts, your thoughts.
Well, the primary election is like a vampire, and I've been trying to drive a stake through its heart since 2015.
Why?
Because all the primary does is it makes it very difficult for new people to get into politics, to get into standing up and running for elections, because in order to run, you need to raise a horrendous amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about it. In 2018, I think $5.5 million were spent in the 2018 election, and $3.5 of it were spent just on the governor's race.
Mm-hmm.
So that means $1.5 million or 100,000 per seat was spent to get into the legislature. If you're a new candidate, somebody like me or some of the other new candidates trying to get in to serve the people of Guam, you have to raise funds. And people who donate money are reluctant to donate money to new names because, you know, what if I donate to you and you don't make it, and I get in and I see that you donated to my opponent? You see, there's that pervasive climate of fear that's all over this island. You know, it's, you know, businesses are afraid of government and people are afraid of the businesses and afraid of government. It's ugly. So what we have to do is we have to break that cycle of fear, and we start by the primary election. If we eliminate the primary election and all of the candidates go to the general, then all the new candidates will have an equal chance at getting enough votes to represent the people of Guam. I'll use Dominic Hernandez as Dominic Hernandez is an example. New face.
Mm-hmm. Smart guy too.
Yeah, and he doesn't have a not a widespread reputation like I do. You know, I've been engaged in community as a community advocate for 12 years. So I've spent 12 years out before the public. So a lot more people are familiar with me than are Dominic Hernandez. Mm-hmm. So, but then you have the politicians who are incumbents, and they have the incumbency advantage. They have an easier time raising money than new faces do. And the way the rules are written by the incumbents, it makes it difficult for independents to run. Now, when I talk with candidates, most of the candidates, if given the choice, would rather have run as independents.
Would you have run as an independent?
I would have run as an independent.
It's just with the primary election.
You have to
very
pick a,
difficult
you have
to
to
do.
pick a side.
Yeah.
You have to pick a team to put on their jersey.
Well, you could run as an independent, but unless you have a slate of 17, 18 independents and a congressional challenger as an independent as well, it's not going to be easy to get
It's not
people
going
to
to be
vote
easy.
in that primary.
It's even
right?
worse than what you made it out to be. In order to run as an independent, I basically have to form an independent party. And to run as an independent party, you can't run any candidates until you've stood up candidates for 2 elections in a row and got 10% of the votes. Well,
Wow.
how can you start up a party and run candidates if you can't run candidates until you've been in operations for 2 years and gotten 10% of the vote? You see, this is
Rules
how-
made by Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
to keep independents out. So strike one is that even in the preamble, it's to help the Democrats and the Republicans select candidates to represent the parties. And in a couple of times that we were able to get a bill introduced, the Republican Democrat party leaders say, yeah, technically it's a party function, but we don't have any money, so that's why we want taxpayers to continue to pay for it. So that's another problem. The political parties are using their control over the rules to limit who can compete against them, and then they're using public funds to enforce those rules. So I'm hopeful what this bill sees the light of day.
Which bill?
375.
375. So the Moylan and Turlock.
Moylan-Terlahi bill.
Okay.
Because it's a cleaner bill, number one. And there's no way 374 stands up. I mean, we're going to have some races, but not all races. And it does nothing to protect the public, and it does nothing to save money. So what's the point in having that bill on the docket in the first place if not to deny the Republican, Jim Moylan, a chance to get some well-deserved glory in this case? When I say well-deserved, he wrote a good bill. The bill does 2 things. It helps make the public safer at a time when our infection numbers are climbing.
Okay.
And it saves the government $350,000 to $500,000
On an entire
at a
election.
time. No, just on the primary.
Yeah.
At a time when government finances are being ripped to shreds through dubious accounting, if you will. I mean, how can we shut down the economy for 3 months and say, oh, we're only going to be off by $8 million?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this?
I was listening to the Bob Klitsky show today, and he made a good point.
Okay.
I still don't really understand the whole, I still don't understand the whole election thing, okay? I'm learning. So Bob Klitsky said the 2 bills, why couldn't they do this before we realized who's running?
That's what you've been pushing this before.
I've been
the slate
pushing it,
was-
and every year they say the same thing. Oh, we can't entertain any bill like this now because we're too close to the elections. I've sat down there and I told Respicio, when he was in charge of governmental affairs, I said, the election's not for 15 months. What do you mean it's too soon to cancel the primary election when the primary election is still 15 months out? And his comment was, commitments have been made, plans have been made, so it's not fair to disrupt plans and commitments that are already in place.
But do you think, Bob, at this point in time, now that there already is a slate on both sides, has a point in criticizing both of these bills? And do you think the point that you have just overcomes the point that Bob has?
If you were listening, you heard he declared himself the winner of our argument. I am declaring myself the winner of the argument because there is no such thing as a perfect time to adjust an election process. But when you're in the middle of a pandemic and the government finances are collapsing, that's about as close as we're going to get to a perfect time to make changes. And we're not talking about sweeping changes. We're talking about having 31 people run in the general election on the legislature instead of 30. We're talking about having 3 people run for the congressional seat instead of 2. So it's not like we're saying, okay, only people that can rub their belly and pat their head at the same time while whistling Dixie get to run. You know, we're not making massive changes. Now, as you know, I was trying to do a voter initiative process that got shut down by the COVID. We had our 10 village meetings, and I was in the process of drafting up the proposed village and voter initiatives to send to the Guam Election Commission when the COVID hit. So obviously we're not going to be able to go village to village and collect all the votes. But the things this is what we're talking about, sweeping reform. Part-time legislature, eliminate the primary election, districting, return to 21 senators. See, those are massive changes. And if those types of changes are being made together, then it should be phased in, like in 2024, so that we have time to make adjustments to the system. But we're not making any adjustments to the system. All we're saying is that for the sake of public safety and for the sake of financial responsibility, let's let all the candidates who qualified run in the general, which will give the Guam Election Commission the time they badly need to recruit and train precinct officials.
Which they're having a problem doing.
Yeah, they're having a problem because of the same reason.
Let's talk about the other bill, because the Wednesday session is going to become a competition between those 2 bills for the hearts and minds and whatever of the senators who will be voting. So Bill 375, you said, does not make sweeping changes. It cancels the primary, and it's all around. Everyone just advances to the general. Bill 374 does something vastly different, especially in the congressional race, because what it does is it creates a group of thousands of voters who will have no country. Meaning, in the 9 villages where there are no mayoral races, people who would have stuck to voting in the Republican primary, to voting for their senatorial candidates and Will Castro or whoever, maybe they wanted to write someone in or whatever, they will now be free to go and upset the Democratic congressional election. And so that seems to me, this is my opinion, is the purpose of Joseph Augustine's bill, and it makes sense. He has the motive to do so because Robert Underwood is his employee at his senatorial office. It just seems to me like a bill set up for Robert Underwood.
So can they say, okay, since your worker is running, we can't hear this bill?
The senators have to be the ones to say that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, but we're asking the senators who, up to this point in time, have made serving politically well-connected insiders their primary focus on life. And we're asking them, the senators as a group, to not serve this politically well-connected insider. It's a stretch of the imagination. And it might even have worked, except for one thing. They don't understand the mood of the citizens and the voters. And the people are smart enough that they realize what games are being played now, especially when they have Kandit and the former Guam Citizens for Public Accountability, which I had to shut down because the law says that if I worked for a senator, I could still campaign and work for the senator, but since I'm working for a political action committee, I can't do both. But what is a senator but a political action committee?
That is something.
But in order for me to run for office, I had to distance myself, and that's why I had to formally close down Guam Citizens for Public Accountability.
You should have asked Lulian Guerrero to hire you as a special assistant. That way you could run for political office.
Well, let's put it this way. I am probably not one of her favorite people. And this goes back to the campaign.
Neither is Troy.
Well, this goes back to the campaign. Now, we're talking about political parties playing games. We saw that happen in the 2018 election. when the Republican
Well, you
turnout.
don't need to remind me about.
Yeah,
the
I
games
know I
that
don't
were
need to
played.
remind you about that, but for those watching, this is where the political parties don't understand what they're up against as far as the people. Their plan, when I say the machine politicians, was that they were going to have all the Republicans, no, thank you. All the Republicans go in and vote in the Democratic for the weaker candidate.
Do you think that happened in the?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look at the fact that
Tenorio had no opponent, right?
Tenorio had no opponent and almost got disqualified because he almost didn't get enough votes to get through the election. So what happened? Obviously, a lot of Republicans went over and voted in the Democratic primary. See, that's the problem with an open system. People can go back and forth. When you look at Guam Election Commission records, 94% of registered voters
Are not party affiliated.
are not party affiliated. 4% are affiliated Democrat, 2% are affiliated Republican. So that's why this whole system is broken, but the political parties keep it alive so that they can do two things. They can raise twice as much money because there's two elections, not one. And they get to control who gets in. Because if you run as a candidate but you don't have party support, you're going to have a very difficult time raising money. Because the people who donate money don't want to get on the wrong side of the parties. That's why they donate to both.
You know who will hate the elimination of a primary election is the media. The mainstream media. Oh, they absolutely hate it. So there are a couple of news organizations that make practically everything they need for an entire year during election season. And if you kick out a primary election, you're kicking out not the significant portion, but a great deal of money in media ad revenue.
Yeah, you are. I know, because remember, I was running ads.
I'm curious to see what the editorials will be like from the newspapers and from the other broadcast stations.
Well, from what the other newspapers have come out supporting, canceling the primary.
Okay.
And it makes sense. They even see it makes sense just from a public health point of view, public safety point of view, as well as the financial point of view. Whether the senators of the 35th as a group, in other words, we needed 10. We need 10 or more senators. And that's where politics comes into play. But we, as citizens, are politicians in and of our own right. And the senators are beginning to feel it. If we think back to March, remember when they had this whole slew of executive order, reinforcement, penalties, crime bills come through, the public stood up and raised such hell that they all failed.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the roadblock checkpoints.
Yeah.
I mean, that got canceled too, but that was public pressure. So what I've been working with and through my efforts, trying to get people to email or contact senators and just say, email message, cancel primary. End of story. Enough people do that, as you know. The politicians pay attention to this stuff. I mean, I remember I worked briefly for like 60 days for Tom Atta, and if we got 5 phone calls or 5 emails a day, everybody got together. What's going on here? We got 5 emails on this subject, So our politicians are hypersensitive to public mood, especially now. Right now, the politicians know that they are behind the 8 ball on public opinion. And that's why we see all these bills coming out, like the double pay for 2,000 employees. And the most outrageous one was 366, the bill to give choice. But it was done on an emergency without a public hearing, introduced and moved to the voting file in a matter of hours for a bill that won't take effect for a year from now.
I have my suspicions about the purpose of that bill. Or not the author's purpose, but all the behind-the-scenes machinations that occurred to get that bill the votes it needed.
Yeah.
to pass. I have my suspicions about what that's about.
Well, see,
It's a longer-term plan.
that's a good coffee conversation
Yeah,
I want to
yeah.
have with you, because I've been focusing on, I have to limit, because there is so much of this stuff taking place.
There is so much. Let's just call it for what it is, Ken. There's just so much BS in politics, and the
Yeah.
dirtiness is already starting. These two primary bills. One of them is born from the dirtiness of politics.
Yeah.
And that's 374.
Yep.
And it's just a behind the scenes pre-positioning of what some hope to be an outcome in the congressional race, and maybe even to help themselves in the senatorial race as well. You know?
Well, I can guarantee you, based on the analysis I've been doing, that the majority of the people that have sponsored that bill are in the bottom 5 and vulnerable. And this is a very, very delicate time for incumbent politicians, because the public has really been paying a lot of attention.
We're watching.
And education. I mean, when people are praying for your liver,
Praying for your liver?
yeah, we're praying for your livers, your shot for recess thing.
Yeah.
And people are praying for your livers.
Oh,
to
you know
be
what?
able to
Thank you
hold
for
up.
reminding me. Wednesday, what time is 10 a.m.? Do we have any appointments around that time?
We do.
We do at 10 a.m.?
Not exactly at 10, but we're supposed to do a commercial on Wednesday.
What time? Do we know?
No. Why? What's
Because
it?
we need to do a
We need
live
to cover
session.
this, yeah.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
Right?
Because the thing is, when I look at the legislature feed, 17, then I flip over to Kandit's coverage of the same session, 832.
Well, we make it fun.
I know, but not only
At
do
the
you make it
expense of
fun,
senators.
but you make it educational. You get into the weeds about what's happening. And that's why I watch hearings and debates and public hearings on the Kandit whenever you guys
Thanks.
are covering it. Because
You know me, I have never been into politics. So when things like that come on, the session, once I hear something that I don't understand, I'm like, that sucks. But so that's the reason why we do it the way we do it here, is because we have to let people understand what's going on.
No, but that's the beauty of the process. Through your interactions with each other and drawing on Troy's experience and knowledge, you're educating thousands of people about what is really happening, what we're looking at. And even, I don't consider myself a neophyte in politics, but I don't consider myself an expert either. I've been fighting as a community advocate. It's a different role. I'm not in the room. I'm not in the back rooms. I can testify I could testify at public hearings. I could lobby, and that was about it. But I wasn't in the room with the doors shut to see what was really going on. And that's what I find so educational about watching you guys do a public hearing. And I know a lot of other people do, because if you go back, Legislature Live 17, Kandit 882. It shows why. And it goes back to the fact that yes, you're entertaining, but you're entertaining with a mission, and people end the hearing knowing more, not only just about what happened and what the bill is, but about the whole process that it's wrapped around.
Thank you, Ken. Harold Cruz says the bill to eliminate the primary is designed to get Will Castro elected, but he still will not win. But I wonder which bill, Harold. There's two. There's 374 and 375. Dave Duenas, fellow candidate for senator, says, simply put, vote smart 2020. David Lebowski is asking your position on medical malpractice mandatory arbitration act reform. Do you have a position on that?
I don't have a position on that per se. In other words, this is not something I've gotten into the weeds on. I don't want to go off half-cocked without looking at it. I've become aware of it through what has been happening and watching, your commercials at the beginning of your show.
Okay.
But this is something that I want to look into, because I have been spending more time focused on public health and Guam Memorial Hospital, the leadership and the expenses, than I have been on the arbitration issue. So I know it's an issue. I know it needs to be looked at. And if there's any changes that need to be made, they need to be made. Because look at, now we'll go to where I am familiar with, Guam YTK.
Okay.
You know, we had an arbitration panel there, 3 people plucked out at random, all attorneys, all that had relationships that were quasi. I mean, when I looked at all the documentation, I thought all the arbitration panels should have been disqualified.
They're absolutely related to the combos. Yes.
Yeah, so it should have been disqualified. So I got to see the flaws in the arbitration panel and with Guam Resource Recovery Partners, because right now the court is still trying to force it into arbitration. But look how stupid this is. We have a company that doesn't exist. We have a principal that's in federal prison. There is no charter. There is no corporate documents. The company doesn't exist. I mean, even when it was a partnership formed in Delaware, the majority, one of the partners pulled out, so it was no longer a partnership. That was Waste Management. They sent a letter to the federal court saying we are no longer partners in Guam Resource Recovery Partners. You know, so what is it? It's nothing. Yet it's still sitting in Superior Court. There's still motions being floated, and they're trying to extort $20 million out of taxpayers. If that number sounds familiar, that's the exact number Guam YTK was trying to extort. So there are so many, it's like a hydra, you know. How many heads does this beast have? Well, that's why we as citizens and as voters have to do what Dave Duenas says. We have to vote smart. We know that a majority of the incumbents that are in the 35th legislature now are serving Adelut. They're not serving the people. All we have to do is look at their votes. And in future videos that I do as a campaign, I'm going to be running down my recommend list. I'm still doing that, even what I did with Guam C4PA, putting together the recommend list. People can follow it or not. It's their choice. But, you know, this is something that I've been doing since the 2016 election. So 2 elections in a row. A lot of people follow it, and they've been asking me about it. I intend to continue to do it. But based on my survey work or group sampling, there are about 7 senators right now that would need to discover a gold mine in their backyard to be able to buy enough advertising to overcome the negative images they have in the community, which brings us back to what you were talking about earlier, the Underwood Castro San Nicolas. Just in the contacts I make on a daily basis and the people I talk to right now, Mike is still strong. He's stronger than Underwood by far. And Castro, I still don't understand the logic behind that, because
now you're not being a good Republican right now, Ken.
I am.
You are not towing the line.
Now, here's what, can we go there for a second about Republicans?
Yes.
Back in the 70s, when I was 18, I was an independent for a few years. And then the more I was around politicians and politics, then when I moved to Hawaii, the most democratic state in the United States, I registered as a Republican. And I was proud of my Republicanness. And I worked for a company that our primary client was all the unions. And they used to razz the crap out of me because of my Republicanness, because there are no secrets in Hawaii like there are here in Guam, you know. So they knew I was a member of the Republican Party. But the difference there is the Republican Party stood for something. The Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the only thing they stand for is getting the majority in the legislature so we can take over the government checkbook.
You're talking about here.
Power.
Here on Guam.
Yeah.
It's all about the power. It's not about the people, it's about the power.
Yeah.
And that is why.
You say that all the time.
Yeah.
Someone tastes the magic of power, and that's it. It's worse than being on drugs.
Yeah. Well, I came into this because of my frustration trying to find viable candidates that were willing to run. the types of people that I was trying to convince to run would run if there was a part-time legislature, because they're smart people, they're successful people. We go back to earlier legislatures. We go back to earlier legislatures that when they were part-time, a majority of the people in there were successful people. They had successful careers, or they had successful businesses. And they worked for the people. They didn't need to work for the 55,000 or unemployment. Assistance.
The PUA.
The PUA. They didn't need the 85,000. And what's so funny is when you go back and look at the testimony.
No, what's so funny is Louise Munya applying for that. That is just.
She forgot she was
period.
making $55,000 a year as a senator.
Oh.
But that goes back. That's a whole new comedy routine coming soon. But when we look back at the 85,000, remember Frank Blas, Chris Duenas, and all those people that testified against Bill 4 to roll back said, if you don't pay $85,000, you'll never get anybody of quality to run. Well, look who's running. Joanne Brown, Chris Duenas, Frank Blas, and Tony Atta. So if they wouldn't run for anything less than 85,000,
what are they doing now?
Why are they running now?
Yeah.
If not to get back into positions of power where they can once again meet in a secret session and give themselves a massive retroactive pay raise.
If they ever tell you that those backdoor meetings never happen, you be sure to tell them that Troy Torres said you are absolutely full of it and you're lying.
Everybody knows they're lying. Because when I'm talking with people, they often bring up the backroom deals,
Those are real.
Yeah.
Those are very real.
Yeah, they're very real.
And sometimes they are smoke-filled rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've never been invited into them, so I can't say from personal experience. And I'm sure that if I'm fortunate enough to become a senator, the last person to be invited into one of those rooms will probably be me. Please,
if you are elected senator, please get rid of that whole caucus thing. That is a back room. That is a sanctioned backroom activity that flies in the face of the open government law.
Absolutely.
That's all that is. Whenever I hear that there's caucus going on, I'm thinking, well, that's where they're designing session.
Yeah. I mean, what's the difference between a caucus and a board of directors meeting that they meet over at like Denny's and they decide how the vote is going to be?
At Shirley's.
Or Shirley's.
They met at Shirley's.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
But
Can you vote to leave the mics on, during session?
Please do.
Can we leave the mics on? We want to hear what's happening.
We won't tell you who, but a sitting senator said, the people of Guam would really understand things better if the speaker just left the microphones on, for everyone to hear what the senators were really saying in those rooms. But Ken, I'm so sorry. Can we go back to this, Mr. Lebowski's point?
Oh, okay.
Because I don't want to leave him hanging. Are you willing to look at this issue and develop a position on it before the election?
Definitely. I'm going to have to, because it's coming up.
Okay.
The only reason I haven't developed a position on it is because I have been fighting a war. The first phase of the war was trying to get viable candidates to run. Mm-hmm. The second phase of the war was a number of people stood up, and I'm thankful, helping them get through the signature drive. That's why we did the pop-ups. We're helping people get the signatures so they can get into the game. Now, the third part is campaigning. And on campaigning, we're going to have issues. Now, I'm fortunate that because I have a large body of work on many subjects, I've got my website. You can go back and you can read 4 or 5 years of op-eds and 3 or 4 years of videos on a wide range of subjects. This is one subject that I have not had to deal with, the medical malpractice arbitration law. I will look at it.
Okay.
Because this is something that's related to what I call GMH, the healthcare lifeboat for 75% of the people on the island that can't afford to fly to Southern California or Manila.
Well,
for
affordability
healthcare.
and accessibility absolutely are the main focus points of this effort for reform of the Malpractice Act.
Yeah.
I think the other thing Mr. Blabasio would probably want to know is, do you have any doctors who are big donors to your campaign?
I would love people to donate to my campaign. You can go to my website and there's a donate button down there on the bottom. I'm a new candidate and I'm facing the same hurdles that every other new candidate is having. How do we raise money to campaign against incumbents in an economy that's crashed with over half the workforce laid off and on reduced hours? And so with so many people just struggling to pay bills, we know that the people aren't going to be able to dig deep like they used to.
So you're not in anyone's pocket?
I am not in anyone's pocket.
Will you ever be in anybody's pocket?
I can't be in anyone's pocket, and I'll tell you why. I got trapped into community advocacy. This is a story that I'd love to tell. I was testifying at a Guam Environmental Protection Agency hearing on the GRRP permit. I was against it. And full disclosure, my family has 177 acres with GRRP kind of in the middle of us. You know, we had two lots and there was in the middle.
This is Guatali, right?
Atatano.
Oh, okay.
Now,
okay.
Guatali is a fiction because Joanne Brown passed a law that said Guatali.
Oh, okay.
So GRRP says Guatali, but when you look at the subdivision, it's actually Atatano.
Okay.
Anyway, so these two elder Chamorro ladies and a Baptist minister's wife came up and asked me if I could represent them. I said, I can't. I can only represent myself unless you guys give me a letter authorizing me to represent you. And if you want, I'll give you a draft. And if you can get about 10 or 15 people to sign it, then I can legitimately claim that I am representing people of Santa Rita. 2 weeks later, they give me 1,378 signatures. So never, ever discount the power of two elder Chamorro women and a elderly Baptist minister's wife. So from that point on, I was representing the people of Santa Rita. Later on, over 2,200 people from all around the island signed another petition allowing me to speak for them before the legislature and administrative bodies against Bill 432. Tina Munya Barnes introduced a bill that the legislature was going to pass, GRP.
431.
431.
Yeah.
Okay, I knew it was one of them.
Yeah.
And so when over 2,400 residents of Guam gave me permission to speak in their behalf again, it's like, oh my God, you know, it's a sacred trust. And the same thing happened again with the formation of Guam Citizens for Public Accountability. You know, I figured out that, okay, if I'm going to do this, let's be more organized about it. So I formed Guam Citizens for Public Accountability and carried that representation forward. So if you look back at the body of bills I've testified against, the actions I've done against the government, you know, I mean, I've filed 4 or 5 lawsuits. I'm still in court over the
GPA issue.
No, not GPA.
Oh, sorry.
We settled that one. Department of Administration being forced to include Guam Regional.
Oh, okay.
You know, so I'm still in court on that issue. But this goes back to, I was honored that people trusted me to speak for them, and everywhere I go, people come up to me and tell me, you know, things.
Well, Ken, ever since you've been vocal, ever since you've been an advocate, you've made enemies in the political sphere. I remember in the Calvo administration, one of the things that I was tasked to do was to attack you on the Abel Industries thing. And I have to admit, I actually don't know much about it except for the news stories, but there are some people who ask about it. Is this something you want to address?
Yes. Abel Industries is one of the most things I'm proudest of.
Okay.
I came into Abel Industries. I was brought in as a consultant.
Okay.
Abel Industries was about to be decertified by the National Institute for Severe Handicap because it was in violation of its charter.
Okay.
So they brought me in to figure out what to do to bring the agency back into compliance.
Okay.
So I met with the CEO of Abel Industries after doing all my research. I said, these are the things you can and should do. And if you do these things, you will be able to take this company from $5 million to $20 million a year.
Okay.
He hired me. And then when I started questioning the accounting system and why he wouldn't upgrade the accounting system, because this was too loose, I could go in and change anything.
Okay.
You know, he said it's paid for. Now, I'd heard that a lot when I was consulting in the mainland, that people would just hold on to technology because it was paid for. But things didn't work. I mean, we're bringing in a lot of money, but we're on slow pay with all of our vendors. You know, things weren't adding up. So when I realized what was going on, I resigned.
Okay.
When the CEO died, the board brought me back. And that's when we discovered the previous CEO, Andrew Porter, had embezzled about $2 million over the years.
Okay.
He used Abel money to buy his houses, rent a house in his personal residence in Alabama. Why would a company that was providing handicap employment on Guam be renting an office in Alabama and renting a warehouse in Alabama and paying for schooling at a private school in Alabama? Why would the company be paying these things? Well, after Andrew died, his family embezzled almost $900,000 from the company. I tracked it down and got it frozen just as they were about to launder it.
Okay.
And then I got the FBI and the federal court system involved. We froze the money. We got the money back to Guam. This close. They almost got away with it. They were that close. And of course, I've got all the documentation.
So Ken, when Governor Cowell was attacking you for this, because he mentioned it a lot on K57 and when KUAM had a morning show, he mentioned it a lot. How come you never said any of this?
Well, first of all, I was too busy running the company, and going back to what I'm proud of. When I started there, we had 72 employees, and we were at about a 50% disability ratio, which is violation.
Okay.
You have to be 75% or more.
Okay.
We were at 50. And then by the time we ran into trouble, and the trouble was because the federal government wasn't paying us, and when they weren't paying us, it causes cash flow problems, especially when they're paying you to the tune of between $200,000 and $400,000 a month, and that stops.
Okay.
So that goes back to a budget problem that the Air Force had. But we went from 75 to 206 employees. We went from a 56% disability ratio to an 82% disability ratio, which means 82% of the work is performed by people with disabilities. We got a letter from Joint Region that we had 5 of the top 10 contracts in Joint Region based on customer satisfaction. And it was our people that did that. I am so proud of the people that work for Abel Industries. It was just amazing what those people could do. And that's why at the time we were shut down, and it was because a process that the Department of Labor had that they couldn't stop. Somebody made a complaint, U.S. Department of Labor didn't investigate. They didn't come to you and say, hey, we got this complaint. They just went ahead and froze our invoices.
Okay.
And they froze our invoices, and we're sitting here waiting for the drop. You know, they're queued. We could look at the computer system and see that the money was queued for payment but it wasn't getting paid. So we finally called the Air Force, and they said, oh, we got a letter from Department of Labor said not to pay.
So just a downward spiral that started with this funky accounting that was going on that was later discovered to be the embezzlement of money by the former CEO.
By the former CEO.
Okay.
That
And
started the ball.
That started the
Yeah,
ball. We
I
were
mean,
recovering, but then, the family of the former CEO, hijacked almost $894,000. And we were trying to get that back. And so we were in court for years trying to get that money back to Guam. And then on top of that, the Department of Labor incorrectly froze invoices. But by the time we found out what the problem was, they couldn't unfreeze them because it was now in Washington, D.C.'s hands.
Okay.
And so we were trying to get help in Washington, D.C. to get the Department of Labor to unfreeze these invoices. And the U.S. Department of Labor said, oh, by the way, if you don't pay your employees on Friday, we're going to arrest you.
Okay.
So I said, let me get this straight. You freeze my money so that I can't pay my employees. You refuse to unfreeze my money so I can pay my employees. But if I don't pay my employees as a result of adverse actions you took against our company, you're going to arrest me. So that's when I changed my Chapter 11 to a Chapter 13. We were in Chapter 11 to reorganize as a result of the Air Force falling behind in paying us when their budget wasn't approved. But we were coming out of it. We were making progress. We were gaining. And I predicted that probably within another year we would have been fine because we got the money back. It was on Guam. We'll get it out of the courts eventually. We were on the verge of getting a contract at the airport, but the Calvo Tenorio administration stepped in and squashed that. I was getting ready to go to court on that when everything hit the fan.
Well, this ever since then, you've been an advocate against corruption and for public accountability, hence the Citizens for Public Accountability. There also have been advocates for or against corruption and for public accountability in our neighboring islands. And you were telling me before the show started that you haven't been really following what's been happening in the CNMI, but please, you're welcome to join in this conversation as we inform our voters. That's something.
I'm going to love hearing this because I'm going to be sitting right here as this story unfolds. But one comment I want to say.
Sure.
In comments you made earlier, you were talking about how the people in the CNMI are starting to wake up and stand up and become vocal.
They're more vocal than the people of Guam, for sure, when it comes to...
Well, we are seeing the people of Guam starting to stand up and be heard. And we saw that earlier this year when the people of Guam were calling in. And you heard it in Senate testimony. I have received numerous calls from constituents and, so that's why I'm looking forward to this next segment on CNMI. But for those I like everybody that attacks me on Facebook, I say, go to the federal court, read the files. There's 900 pages of documents.
Well, that's where the problem starts. 900 pages is not.
And all you have to do is go there and write down, I want to see the Abel Industries file, and you'll have access to everything.
Cool.
But nobody does that.
Well, thank you for addressing the issue. It's come up here and there. It's come up from your detractors, of course, but it's also come up from people who've heard it from the detractors and are wondering. And so thanks for explaining that to them. Do you have any questions about that before?
No.
So thank you, Candidland, for being so patient, especially our viewers in the CNMI who've been waiting for us to talk about the issue there. It's our breaking news tonight. And I think Kandit so far is the only news organization to discuss this. But after months...
Since November.
Since November. Were the raids last year?
Yes.
Or was the raids 2018?
No, the raids was last year, November.
Gosh, the time is just... Okay, so the raids happened last year against Governor Ralph Torres and the casino. And that's one thing. There's a federal investigation. Everyone is just waiting for, what do you call it, the hat to drop? Is that the phrase?
Drop.
Oh, for the shoe to drop on that thing. But as that was going on in December, Kandit started reporting because we received leaked documents. They were receipts, reimbursement memos, invoices that Governor Ralph Torres would submit to the Secretary of Finance between 2016, when he became the governor of the CNMI after the death of Governor Eloy Enos, all the way to the present time, or at least into 2019, were the last reimbursement memos and receipts that we saw. And these were, he was buying, I think it was 12 different headsets, the Bose headsets, boom boxes, Cheetos.
Was it Johnny Walker for Will Castro, or
Johnny
Blue?
Walker Blue for as a gift to Senator Will Castro. That was a scandal. Hotel rooms, Cheetos, hotel rooms that beyond the hotel room for himself.
Yeah, or
and
a
his
hotel
wife.
room, and then lots of food.
A lot of food.
like
Purchased, and if you look at the receipt, purchased at 1:30 in the morning, on a Saturday. And on the official representation, he says he hosted a meeting with the Western Governors Association. So clearly the governor was using or was being reimbursed for expenses that were not for the Commonwealth. The taxpayers benefited in no way for, with these, and some of them.
Even his wife was being reimbursed.
Even his wife was being reimbursed.
Yeah.
Oh, it's pretty bad. It is
And
really,
she
really
likes,
bad.
Chicken Vienna sausage.
Chicken Vienna sausage. And apparently that's the really good one. And I've never tried this.
Yeah.
So this amounted to, I think, close to, if not more than $100,000 in personal expenditures for which he was reimbursed. Oh, yeah. Your brain. Now you wish you were following the story, right? So... So this was in December of last year that we started doing this. It was just a series of stories that we did. And then I believe it was January when Congressman Ed Probst and Congresswoman Tina Sablan from the House of Representatives over there entered into the official record of the House these documents that Kandit provided. So and Kandit is actually named, and we're very proud. We are now part of the Legislative Journal of the Commonwealth Legislature, and it's in this very historic, dark, but historic part of the Commonwealth government that today got a big kick in the butt in the right direction. So let me preface this with, they entered it into the record, and what they wanted was an investigation to begin into Governor Ralph Torres. And it's a Republican-controlled legislature. That I believe of their 9 senators, 8 of them are Republicans, 1 is independent. Of their 20 representatives, 6 of them are independent. They belong to no party, and 14 of them are Republican. So they have, and Governor Ralph Torres is a Republican. The Republicans that's the stronghold in the CNMI. And so in January, the Republicans were reluctant to do anything. They did not want to call an investigation, but there was enough public pressure to begin an inquiry from 2 of their standing committees, General Government Operations and Ways and Means. The 2 standing committees began an inquiry, and then I considered it a stall tactic at the time. All they did was ask the Department of Finance for these very same documents that were given over by Probst and by Sablan. But now we're coming close to an election. The general election in the CNMI is coming up, right? Mm-hmm. And we all know how that works here on Guam too, where our incumbents get more active and they begin to break away from, the people who they normally would be friends with in the political power structure, because they want to be their own person. They want to show the people that they're doing whatever, right? And I don't know if that's the case here, or if the Republicans in the legislature over there just had enough of Governor Ralph Torres. But today, just all of a sudden, they've been doing this whole pandemic thing, public health emergency, PUA and all that stuff. But just like this, the Speaker of the legislature over there, Speaker Blas Jonathan Attal, or BJ Attal, wrote a memorandum. Can you read it?
It's a memorandum dated July 6, 2020, to all House members, from Speaker Blas Jonathan BJ T. Attal. Subject: appointment of special committee on fiscal review of executive expenditures. Pursuant to official request for information, the House Standing Committee on Ways and Means has received materials concerning expenditures and reimbursements of the current administration. However, due to the issues involving COVID-19, as well as the extremely limited funds that are available for appropriations, the importance of the 2021 fiscal year budget will require the Ways and Means Standing Committee to focus on the challenging task of preparing a balanced annual Appropriations Act. Therefore, in consideration of the issues and serious implications that have been officially raised relative to executive expenditures of Governor Ralph D.L.G. Torres, I am obliged to create a special committee on fiscal review and executive expenditures to review said materials in a fair and reasonable manner. So they elected, this is the special.
Yeah, so
right?
the speaker appoints 4 Republicans and 4 independents, including Probst and Sablon, to this special committee. And this is how significant this is. The last time a committee like this was put together was the committee that led to the impeachment of former Governor Benigno Fitial.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. This is an investigative committee into the governor of the CNMI.
Spending.
It's just such a huge thing, and it just came all of a sudden, like, you know, none of my contacts in Saipan saw any of this coming. It was sent to me today at 5:30. I tried to go to mass. I did not choose politics over mass, but the doors were locked at the Agania Heights Church, and then in a very sinful way, I was like, I gotta go work on this story.
No, that
we've been an advocate also for the people in Saipan. I don't know if you know, but there's still families living in tents from the last typhoon.
A lot of families
that they had, you know. So there was a lot of money that transpired, a lot of people that got paid, and the money never got to the citizens. You know, so they're still in tents. So this information we've had and that we've published have been in the hands of the people, the other media in Saipan, and it was never published.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so it took us here at Kandit, Troy's smart mind, you know, actually, they approached us and tried, the governor, when the raid happened, someone from Saipan came over and approached us to spin it. They said they wanted to hire us, and that's not what we're about. So we told them they can suck it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not kidding. They said, name your price.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. So Kandit said, suck it, right? And then we just went hardcore. Boom. Everything that we received, we talked about it. Troy went and requested all kinds of documents. Troy even went out there. People were saying, Troy, don't go. You're going to die.
The people that were so nice to us. Carlos and I went, and they were so nice to us. And I was like, I mean, except for like the politicians, but some of the politicians were nice to us.
Yeah, so Troy went out, you know, he did some, you know, investigative work, took some pictures and did what he needed to do, and he came home. But
this is crazy, right? Isn't this crazy?
Yeah, we've been advocating for the people in Saipan.
Yeah, well, you see, you've been advocating for the people of Saipan, and the 3 of us, and there are other advocates out there as well, but we're kind of the more vocal and the more visible ones. But you know, you guys have a relationship with those who trust you and are feeding you the information, because they know that when they tell you something, you're going to act on it. That's what I had, because I mean, if you look at the variety of issues I got involved with, it wasn't because, you know, I woke up and said, hey, I'm going to go after Guamai TK, you know, or this. It was because, you know, someone will come up to me in Payless or some other store and say, Mr. Ken, you know, you really need to look into this and this and this. And I would ask them, well, you know, you're more credible. You've been there. Yeah, but you don't understand. You know, this is the climate of fear.
Yeah,
you know,
it's real.
My children, you know, you know, they work for the government and stuff like that.
It's very real.
And so that's why we are needed at what we do, because it's the only way this story gets told. And when this story gets told, more people stand up. I mean, I remember 3-4 years ago, talk radio, same 7 people all day, calling all the stations. Now I listen.
Election time, there'd be 20
Yeah.
additional ones.
And you could hear them when they all say the same thing,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
You know, when the
They're called
trolls
Black
come
Ops.
on, they got their scripts in front of them, you know. But now you listen to talk radio, and you hear so many new people, and you know they don't. I mean, you get a few ramblers, but most of them they call in and they have a subject they want to talk about.
I love listening to Ray and Bob's shows on The Point.
Yeah.
Just the wealth of information coming from people who just randomly call in, and they know they have these angles that they take, and it's very educational. I like listening to them because it's educational for me, and Bob's pretty funny when he makes fun of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got dinged today. He's probably going to take away my blue star now. But that's different.
No, I don't think you can minus blue stars. You can only add blue stars.
Bob can
You
do
can't-
whatever he wants.
Yeah.
Bob is 176 years old. He is a Marine. He can do whatever he wants.
Well, getting back to what's happening in the CNMI, what's happening here, what we're seeing here is what I call the 70s resurgence. Now think about
What's
it.
that?
The Vietnam War didn't end because people marched and burned their bras and sang protest songs. It ended when a bunch of younger people decided that they were going to change the system from within. And they started voting, and they started running for offices and getting offices. And that's what we're seeing now. I mean, look at the candidates that are running now. We've got a really diverse collection of candidates. Now we got the retreads, I call it. You know, the people have been through the system so many times.
Yeah.
You know,
They're not incumbents, but
Yeah,
they're
we don't want them.
they're has-beens.
Yeah, they already had their chance to do what they needed
yeah.
to do.
But remember,
we are not gonna
every
give
single one of them testified that they
are
would
not-
not do this job. For
Yeah, but we aren't going to
$55,000.
give them a chance.
Yeah.
Because they didn't, whatever plan they had didn't
Obviously
work.
didn't work.
So they want to come back. We're not going to give them that chance.
Yeah.
But we do need to register to vote, and we need to vote.
Yeah, and what we're seeing, I mean, look at the new candidates that are coming up. The majority of these new candidates are coming up with no high profile. Yeah, I mean, before Dominic Hernandez stood up, did you ever hear of Dominic Hernandez?
No.
How about Denise Pangolina? Did you ever hear of her before?
She's not running though.
I know.
She's not running. We love her.
Damn it, she put
Yeah.
her family first. God, don't you hate it when someone does that?
Sandra Regis is another one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you see,
We had an opportunity to interview John Ananich.
Yeah.
Well, now we were sitting down with you. You know, we'd like to interview these newer candidates so that they would have a profile. Of course, we would also like everyone's ad revenues.
yeah. Hey, I'm right there with you. I mean, but it goes back to how we can help educate the public. That has to be our role as community advocates, because information is power. You're seeing it in the CMI. You're starting to see it here now too, because you know when this is a story that I'm really, really proud of. When a grandmother type came up to me in the parking lot at a large big box store that specializes in home building materials, you know, when she came up to me and she said, "Mr. LG, I wish I could afford to give you some money for your campaign, but all I can do is give you a hug. Can I hug you?" And it's like, oh, I'll take
love
all
that.
the hugs. Yes.
I love that.
You know,
Yeah.
because, you know, that is heartfelt. That's heartfelt.
Yes.
You know, that's not checkbook politics. That's heartfelt.
Yeah, people feed us all the time.
Yeah.
They cook for us.
Me too.
You know, I'm like, Troy, I don't think we should take food from people. We don't know what they, you know, but I'm like, that food looks good. Let's eat it.
Smells pretty good to me.
I know. I have the same problem.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
when I was going around getting signatures and I was doing the village walks to get signatures, you can't go to a person's house as well, maybe if they didn't like me as a candidate, it might have been different. But it took me a week to collect the first 64 signatures, because every single person wanted to share the story, and I've told you this, okay, we'll sign your mayor petition, but we really wish you were running for senator instead. You know, after 64 people in a row tell you that, you know, yeah, maybe the people, if I'm going to be an advocate for the people, maybe I should start listening to them. But you can't leave a house without a plate. I swear to God.
Yeah.
You know, at times my car was killing me because, you know, on my diet, right? And then I've got all these plates of yummy illegal food in the back seat, you know, and I got like 6 bottles of water, 2 liters of.
You know, you might get
all this.
arrested by the COVID police for telling these stories, right? you might.
Hey, I challenge. Remember, I was in federal court over the
Yeah.
checkpoints.
Yeah.
But it goes back to our people are smart. Our people are getting braver.
And they're
our
hungry.
People,
They're hungry for information.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're hungry for information. I mean, a couple of times I'd be stopped, and this is one of my I love. I have what I call my impromptu sessions at a big box home building supply retailer, and they move me to the back of the paint aisle because I'll be stopped, and usually it's right there near the cash registers and the self-checkout where people are congregating before COVID-19, and they would stop, and then more people would stop, then more people stop. Then we got a Q&A session going with about 25 people, and the guy from the paint comes up, Mr. LG, could you kind of move it to the back of the paint department over here because you're creating a traffic jam?
Ken, did you know that there is well, of course you know that there is a large block of Chuukese voters now. Did you also know there's a large block of CNMI voters who are residents of Guam now? They vote on Guam, but they're very much invested in issues going on in the Commonwealth. You really should check out our stories on what's going on in the Commonwealth. And you would be envious, because I'm envious of the kind of dialogue that happens. And granted, many people there are afraid to speak up. But to each other
or to people like us.
Yeah, they
Have you ever watched
their
a
level
session?
of dialogue is
Of
A Saipan?
it's up there.
It is nothing like they put Guam to shame.
They do.
They don't
was
even
it like
have
the Taiwan section
Not a
where they
single
get in
recess.
Not a
fist fights?
single.
Not a single recess.
No, they're very professional with each other.
Holy smokes.
Not one
Yeah.
recess.
And it
Well, that
flows.
shows competence.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
They're super competent. Like
Yeah. No joke. No joke.
I mean, I can't. I mean, if I drank, I'd be right there with you guys, because I mean, when they're having a recess to look up how to phrase a sentence.
you're talking about the Guam legislature.
Yeah, I'm talking about.
Yeah,
the
when they said that
legislation.
they need legal counsel to finish the amendment, I'm like, isn't that your job? Aren't you the senator? Like, what is this? What are we doing here?
Well, you
But,
see, the problem is we have people in there that they have a job. They don't have a mission. You know, their job is to keep getting elected so they can continue to collect that paltry 55,000. Remember, I mean, one senator applied for unemployment because her senatorial salary was so insignificant she didn't consider it worth mentioning.
I wonder, you know, maybe people are going to kill me for saying this, but I wonder how is it okay in anyone's book that a senator can spend every morning from Monday to Friday on funeral runs and not at work?
Anymore.
Yes, they still do. Oh, I mean, not during COVID, but like, you know, any other time. There are some who did that.
Yeah.
And it boggles my mind. How does anyone think that that's okay?
Well,
Because
that
that's
was
not
the
what we
basis
elected
of
them
my
to do.
part-time legislature, because when I was trying to lobby the senators, 75-80% of the time they're not in their office. Well, where are they? Oh, well, you know, there's a wake, a funeral, a birthday party, a commemoration
campaigning.
ceremony. You know, and that was before
that's
COVID.
all they're doing is
Yeah.
campaigning.
That's campaigning.
Yeah, that's campaigning.
During a time that people are paying them to work.
Yeah, and that's why we see more resolutions than we see bills, and the resolutions are campaigns. I mean, who writes a resolution congratulating somebody on 18 months of continuous employment? Really?
Who did that?
You know,
Who did that?
I
Say
can't
it.
remember off the top of my head, but anybody can go in and look at the resolutions and read them. 22 years of marriage, 25 years of marriage. My favorite one is we are a resolution acknowledging the 33rd year of Guam Power Authority. Really? You know, like people didn't know Guam Power Authority existed. It took a legislative resolution.
There was a GovGuam director, because I was in charge of the communications office once, right? And so we had to do the proclamations. And this one GovGuam director always wanted to have a proclamation for something. So she wanted to proclaim Veterans Day. And I was telling Philip Leon Guerrero was my assistant at the time. I said, Philip,
Veterans Day?
Can you please tell her that Veterans Day was already declared by Congress? It was like in 1927 or something like that. Like, and every single year we have Veterans Day because Congress. There's no need for the governor to proclaim it. And so she complained, and so the governor called me. He was like, come on, Troy, this is, so-and-so, can we just do this? I'm like, Governor, what's next? Are you going to proclaim Christmas? That Christ has been born on December 25th?
Hey, I think it was the last year they did the 100th anniversary of the sinking of the Comoran. Now think about, that's a German battleship that scuttled itself when America entered World War I. So nobody from the Comoran is alive. All the relatives of the Comoran are in Germany.
That's not true. Madeline Verdallo is still working at
All right. You had knowledge I did not have. I was not aware that she was around back then, 1916. But think about that. The taxpayers of Guam spent about $400 for this resolution. You see how they're framed.
They're ornate. But the ceremony.
And then the ceremony. Time. And then the time. So I capped it out at $400. I think we're up to maybe 400 resolutions. So there's $80,000 that have been spent. And 99% of them are useless. And the 1% that have any value, or I can't even think of one off the top of my head.
I bet you Amanda Shelton has the most resolutions.
I'll bet you she does. She's always giving out those resolutions.
I haven't been keeping score,
I'm gonna do that.
Every now and then I just look.
I have a confession. So when I worked with Dennis Rodriguez, right? I wanted to do one of those, let's see who has the most resolutions, and let's slam him, because we were running for governor at the time. Dennis Rodriguez had one of the highest numbers of resolutions. I was like, let's pull back from this plan right now.
Polish target pistol. Well,
I was like, Senator, why do you have so many resolutions? He's like, all of these people really want, a lot of times, people request these resolutions for themselves. And I'm thinking, as I'm looking at these people who are requesting proclamations and resolutions for themselves, where they're demanding that you put their name in, I'm like, who are you people? Like, who does this? Like, really? Is this really at the
Yeah.
Let Governor Leon Guerrero spend some fireworks on you at a party for yourself, because that's what public service has come to.
Party, Troy.
A
potluck.
Can you please? We got to end our show soon, because we've been on the air for quite a while. Can you please promise us that you are going to do I don't know what it is, but that you're going to do something that is going to reshape the culture of public service on this island, lest we become truly the Isla de Ladrones?
Well, what I intend to do is to take my advocacy program to the floor of the legislature. I'm going to continue doing like I'm doing on my campaign so far. I've had a couple people looking at my Facebook and say, Ken, that's not you're not campaigning. When you're talking about other candidates, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot. When I'm talking about these, get these new people in, Well, the only way we're going to make change to the way politics are done in Guam is we're going to have to change the entire diaper. You don't just change part of it. You have to change the whole thing. The only way we do that is we get 10 new people in, because we have some good senators in, but they need help. And then what we do is we bring in a large group of public servant minded people that haven't had a chance to get, for politicians to get their hands in and corrupt them. I mean, who heard of Dominic Hernandez before today, So we have a good working group. I've met with a lot of these people. Hell, we spent days running together as a pack collecting signatures. And when you spend a lot of time with people, the false faces drop, the facades drop, because you can't sit at a table for 8 hours in the parking lot at DNA Plaza in Tamuning without learning something about the people you're sitting with. And I mean, Franklin Meno, Bunker. First time I met him was at Shirley's when I was doing a lecture to the Democrat candidates, and he and I got into it out in the parking lot. He just tore into me, I tore into him. But in the process, I met him again at the start of this campaign, and the change in him was amazing. I like to think I've changed too, but I don't think I have, because I'm old enough that I'm set in my ways. So what you see is what you get. But with Bunker, there's insight that comes from going through a life-changing event. He lost his leg.
Yeah, I let me tell you, I met him at the store. He was donating food, and I didn't know him. I met him. He put the stuff in my Jeep, and when I look down, I see that he only has one leg. So I start tearing, because here's this man, donating food. I don't know, and I just I called Troy, and I was crying on the phone like, Jello, and so
These are the types of people we need in the legislature. People who love people more than power.
Thank God you didn't say compassion, because I really hate that term in politics.
Oh, no, it's not. It's not compassion. What we're looking at here right now is there's a group of people, and I apologize. You just happened to got me on my favorite topic, these new people running. I know that if we all get in, there are issues we are going to fight like cats and dogs over, and that's fine.
No, that's good.
The last thing you want is, 15 clones.
Yeah.
And we saw what happened in the 35th.
Yeah.
What I want in this legislature is a public service mindset. And just what you described there is a perfect example. Then I'm sure Denise probably going to hate this, but when I met her and she started telling, I wanted her to run so bad, because she has the attitude of a mama grizzly bear defending its cubs.
So
and I get her on any subject, the grizz comes out, and I am so upset, but I understand why. Denise, I'm not trying to push you, although I did try to push you, but when she gets on any one of those subjects that she is passionate about, and it's,
I agree.
Village safety, quality of life, elder abuse, cost of living, get her on any subject, and you're not dealing with Denise. You're a 13-foot tall, 2,500 pound grizzly bear with attitude and claws about 8 inches long.
We love her.
I hope she can get it together and run in 2022. But those are the kind of candidates we need to get into the legislature. They're not professional politicians, and thank God I don't think they ever will be professional politicians. The whole model of our country was built on was citizen legislator, people who come up and spend a little time bringing the wealth of their experiences and representing the people they are to a house and work for a few years, then go back to their lives.
Yeah.
What we've got here on Guam is we got people retiring out of and it was never meant to be a lifetime job.
No, let's be real. But what we have is a system that promotes people who are trying to elevate themselves to be the king or queen of Guam.
Yeah.
And they use the legislature to do it. It's a social climbing. It's a ladder.
Well, I think as a result of the work I've done and other people have done and the continuous work you do, We're educating the people, and the 36th, I think, will be the first iteration of the People's House. Now, in the 34th, we elected a bunch of new senators. Several of them have made the cut, as far as I'm concerned. They have shown themselves to be true public servants. And then in the 35th, we got more senators in. Not so many made the cut, but we do have a couple of public service. Now, what we need to do is in the 36th, we keep doing that. That's why I don't want term limits. I want to keep that 2-year cycle, because every 2 years we get to change the government. And if we're smart about it, we vote out the ones that are more concerned about the financial safety and security of politically well-connected insiders than the people. We get rid of them. They show themselves right off the bat. Look at the 35th. The very first bill they passed was the GRMC corporate welfare bill, followed closely by the or more tax.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, they weren't able to wear their sheep's clothing for very long before their true colors came through.
Well, Ken, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And before we do our sign off, you want to do your pitch to the camera, or maybe the pitch to this camera.
To this one, yes.
You don't forget to say, please vote for me. I'm Ken.
Please vote for me. I'm Ken Leon Guerrero, a temporary Republican, but a dedicated public servant who for the past 12 years has been I've been standing up for the people of Guam before the legislature, and as Troy can vouch, before administrations and before different government agencies. I'm looking forward to serving the people of Guam from the floor of the legislature, bringing the same passion to that honor that you've given me, that I've shown as Guam citizens for public accountability. And with me on the floor of the legislature, I guarantee you that the people's voice will be heard before every piece of legislation is voted on.
Thank you, Ken. You have anything
Thanks,
else,
Ken.
Chillin?
I forgot to talk. I wanted to sing a song before we introduce.
Oh, shoot, that's right.
My song was Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and that's Governor Ralph Torres. That's all.
Governor Poppy Chulo 670.
Cheetos, you know, he loves Cheetos, all kinds of Cheetos.
Dude,
you'd be amazed at the receipts.
They're on the receipts. You have to look at our coverage.
I saw one of them where he was charging gas and pocket knives, buck knives and gas. You know, I mean, what are the people, the CNMI, paying for gas in Idaho for, and buck knives?
It's not a joke.
Go to our website, kandidnews.com. There's a CNMI tab. Now I forgot to tag every single story that there was with the CNMI tag, but there's a lot of them on that. Enough for you to go like, wow, I cannot believe this. For Candid News, I'm Troy Torres.
And I'm Johnny Rosario.
Good night.
Good night.